Oh hi, I didn't see you there. My name is Bliss Foster and today we are going to be looking at Hussein Chalayan's Spring-Summer 2000 collection entitled Before Minus Now. Hussein Chalayan's work is kind of a favorite among fashion heads because it seems to prioritize the conceptual and the artistry behind fashion design over just having a pretty runway show with pretty girls in it. Watching his shows is kind of like reading a very complex, good poem. You might not be catching all of the references, everything might not be making perfect sense, but you can tell that there is an enormous amount of thought behind what's going on. The show itself is a collaboration between Chalayan and the architectural engineering firm B Consultants, which as far as I can tell does not exist anymore. It's a little difficult to find a lot of information about the specifics of that collaboration, but I imagine that they had to do with the transforming airplane dress and with the expanding dress. We do have show notes of sorts. This is a paragraph of information that was given about this collection for a recent exhibition for Chalayan's work in London. It reads, "In Before Minus Now, Chalayan focused on invisible forces as a means to construct form. The designer was particularly interested in phenomena that become invisible entities. He explored the powers of expansion, magnetism, and erosion, and how these can be applied to garments in order to create shape. To express expansion, Chalayan used heat to modify the shape of a flared red dress. Harking back to the 1950s New Look silhouette, Chalayan's take on the feminine dress was inflated on stage where it unfolded and amplified in volume. Then, Chalayan's fiberglass remote control airplane dress was transformed with the touch of a button. The body was consequently metamorphosed through an artificial man-made force that combined the elements of magnetism and technological advances. To embody the action of erosion, Chalayan shaved a bale of shapeless pink tulle, giving it the contour of a dress. In the same way the formation of mountains occurs through natural erosion, Chalayan formed his own monuments through the gradual cutting of the fabric. In the finale, 5 models were presented wearing deconstructed corsets in vivid colors with matching pleated skirts. With these designs, Chalayan paid tribute to the natural force of the wind as a powerful tool that can alter and create forms." We're keeping this introduction very trim so that we can dive into the meat of this runway show. I am so excited. Hussein Chalayan is one of my favorite designers. Let us begin. Chalayan himself said that this collection was based on the idea of using the intangible as a means to create form. That's a quote from Chalayan, but a lot of the ideas that I'm talking about here are going to be based off of concepts that are in Caroline Evans' Fashion at the Edge. This book is fucking incredible. You should get it. So we're mostly talking about the forces that create the visible world around us, the natural visible world, the technological visible world, the forces that are not visible that are able to shape those visible things. As Dr. Evans points out, the show invitation contained a photograph with the absurd image of a small boy in a yellow t-shirt trying to control a jet plane flying overhead with his remote control. So it sounds like we're going to be dealing with the invisible forces that shape things, but we also might be touching on this idea of trying to control things that are way outside of the realm of our control. We might also be touching on this idea of trying to control something over which we have absolutely no real control. One of the most appealing things about Hussein Chalayan's runway shows is that they do not seem to fit the normal runway show format at all. It really seems more like an installation artist was told to do a runway show as one of their projects. He doesn't care at all for the traditional runway features of having a straight line that models walk down and then walk back. His runways tend to look more like stage play sets. Despite all of the unorthodoxies that we do love him for, Hussein Chalayan's dresses were always shockingly wearable. Like, all of the stuff that we see and we're like, oh yeah, this is the incredible airplane dress, this is this other really wild thing, check this out! The vast majority of the stuff that he was showing was beautiful and could be worn by just about anybody. There's a really good quote that Chalayan has about his process where he says, "I think processes are for the designer. The result is the important thing for the people and they don't have to know the process." So I feel like he was typically trying to create something that would just strike someone as, that's a beautiful dress, I think I would want to own that, rather than trying to blow you away so hard with the concept and so hard with the theater that you can't really think of any of this as anything other than just a prop in a play. That can most clearly be seen with the first set of dresses that we see in this show. I mean, this stuff is beautiful, but it is not by any means an unattainable kind of dress. It definitely looks like something that you would just wear to a wedding. I try to be as transparent as possible when I can't crack the code on a specific thing in a show, and this is definitely an example of that. I have no idea what these things are. The dresses themselves seem pretty typical, but these references to some architectural thing, I guess, maybe? I have no idea what these are. These are somewhat common in Chilean shows. We see these just kind of things that almost look like tacked on to the look as some kind of avant-garde accessory. I have a really difficult time deciphering what these are trying to make reference to. If you know, please leave a comment about it. Next, the first big moment of the show starts up. I imagine that this dress is one that he collaborated with bee consultants on. The rest of the models kind of disappear into the offstage area, and then Chalayan himself comes out to hook up a pipe underneath her dress. Chalayan is a pretty shy dude and not much of a showman, so he's mostly focused on not making it look like he is doing stuff underneath her dress, other than hooking up this pipe. Before we move any further here, there's something kind of fun that I want to point out. This doesn't have to do with analysis so much as just industry things at the time. The video that Chalayan has actually posted up for this on his YouTube channel is one where they just recorded it in the room the day of the show, and they just put a mic next to the camera itself. And so the mic was picking up the live piano that was being played in the room, and then also it picks up more dominantly, really, photographers arguing over who gets to be in what position as the show continues.
Go ahead, down, please. Down, please.
Yes, I'm good.
There we are here.
It's cute, they're like being catty with each other. So what was before a just well-cut, beautiful red dress, after the expansion is caused by heat, we then have a reference to Dior's new look from the 1950s, which is demonstrated beautifully once she starts walking off set. I mean, the buoyancy that volume creates in the skirt is just absolutely beautiful when it's in movement. Now, how is this effect actually achieved? I don't know. But Caroline Evans does. Quote, "A vermilion dress had an electrically wired hem with a memory so that once the current was passed through it, its skirt spread and lifted, seeming to hang in the air against the force of gravity." Again, I strongly recommend that you get this book. The second section of the show is definitely the area where we have the stuff that's trying to attract buyers the most. Though, if we remember, Chalayan is trying to show us three things: magnetism, erosion, and expansion. Here, I think we see a little bit of the erosion deal. The finishing detail on many of these outfits seem to demonstrate sort of an erosion-like effect, sort of the kind of thing that we could see in a shoreline, or the kind of thing that we see in a mountain range, or just in rocks that are by a river. The kinds of things that are shaped by wind and water, just unseen natural forces. Just things that make up the visual world around us that are shaped by natural forces. We also see a heavy use of drawstrings in this specific part of the collection. I think that is more than likely a reference to small forces that make huge impact over the shape of things. In this case, clothes. In the next section, we have a little bit of a process mystery. We have a statement from Chalayan about these dresses and kind of the process of bringing them about, but we don't have all of the details about that process. So what was said was... I'm just gonna let you listen to Chalayan explain it himself. This is from his lecture on his recent work that he did at the Architectural Association in London.
This idea, again from the same collection, was inspired by the idea of expanding forces, and the idea was that the dress would be cut bigger and it would be shrunk back to the body, so you had this, you consequently destroyed the details. For somebody who wouldn't know, they might think it's just a frilly dress, but it really wasn't.
So I'm guessing what that means is that the dresses that we're seeing here were in fact much bigger, and that they used some process to shrink them down. So I'm guessing the shrinking process was what brought about all of these kind of, what he described as frilly details right here. Like I said, I am a little bit confused about the details of the process here, but we do have an elevator pitch for the process of these dresses, and that elevator pitch is pretty fucking cool. Also in this section, we see a reference to a piece that was originally presented in the Fall-Winter 1999 collection, which is entitled Echo Form. This is a denim outfit that's meant to kind of reflect the wear that we put onto clothes back onto the body. This is another concept where I'm a little bit shaky on exactly how that's being represented in the clothes, but It sounds cool, doesn't it? And it probably sold really well. Autumn Winter 99 was a really big moment for Chalayan. It's kind of one that launched him off, and we'll be seeing the reason why here in just a moment. But I imagine that he's wanting to recall elements of that collection, if for nothing else than for sales. One thing that's kind of interesting about Hussein Chalayan shows is that the audience is there kind of expecting to have their mind blown, so there's a lot of pauses for cheering. One dress that I thought it was kind of unusual that they cheered for was this one right here. Everybody kind of freaked out, and the way the show is set up, it didn't seem to be planned that they freak out then. Everyone just seemed to respond to it really well. The detail work on all of these pieces seems to be trees, but it looks at first glance like it's an explosion or just a crazy random assortment of colorful threads. Here I think that Hussein is trying to demonstrate that the natural forces that shape the visual world around us are kind of chaotic in their nature, that there's no like single streamlined process that creates things like a tree, but that the end result is always this very beautiful final thing that we have a very clear vision of in our heads. If you think about the way that a tree is actually created, where the seeds of another tree fall off and are carried by the wind or by animals or by just whatever, and then get planted and then start growing as a result of water and all of these natural things that are happening around it, the whole thing seems very chaotic, and that there would be no way of just describing it in a very simple way. This is the process by which a tree comes about. All of these forces that bring this about are very chaotic and very unpredictable, but the end result is something that just is very beautiful and simple. Additionally, Caroline Evans asserts that these do look an awful lot like architectural wireframe drawings, which is a cool little added detail as well, since Hussein Chalayan is super fascinated with architecture. And again, we're seeing that Chalayan likes to demonstrate this kind of thing in a very wearable way. I mean, all of the stuff that we're seeing right here could just be thrown onto a shelf in Middle America and people would pick it up. And I love complex clothing. I love really artful clothing, stuff that is so expressive and so high concept that it is totally unwearable unless you're just really, really brave. I love stuff like that. I'm a total sucker for it. I own many things that are like that. But I think it is a demonstration of how brilliant Chalayan is, that he has this just fixated commitment to making things very wearable and approachable. That to me seems like a very difficult balance to strike. The next section of the runway show is the creme de la creme, and it is only one dress. Maybe arguably two looks, but really it's only one. This is the legendary airplane dress. This is definitely not the first time that we've seen this dress. It's already become the most distinctive part of his career, even this early on when it was showing in 1999. We see the little boy from the invitation photo shoot come out with his remote control and crouch down and look exactly like he is coming out of a Balenciaga show from today. And the dress does its thing, the transforming dress. This is something that it maybe doesn't look super remarkable when we look at it here today, but I think if we can think back to the Iris Van Herpen analysis that we did a few months ago, we can remember that in order to create moving parts on something that is just a dress on someone's body, that requires a lot of very nuanced engineering. To get these tiny little motors to work in this very specific way and in a reliable way and in a way that is very smooth and graceful, a lot goes into that. From an autobiographical standpoint, Hussein Chalayan first came into contact with the symbol of the airplane when he was 7 and he was sent from North Cyprus, his home, to London where he was meant to study. And he felt this big feeling of isolation, and himself said as an adult that he was way too young to be doing international travel, especially alone. The notes from the exhibition about Chalayan's work in London specify that the airplane came to represent a few different things over the course of his career. There's often this reference to movement or to speed, but it also represents in more of an autobiographical way exile or migration as a result of war. Within this show, I think the way that it moves in terms of the other symbols that it's put up against is this unseen force of technology shaping the world around us. That technology as a concept is not necessarily something that is seen, it's just sort of a cultural force that's moving and that shapes the very literal way that we live our lives. And I really love that there's the symbol of the little kid that's standing there trying to control it. I think that sort of is kind of this symbol for the way that mankind wants to control the world around it. There were ultimately two images that got included with the invitation. There's one of the kid trying to control an actual airplane with this remote control that's in his hand. Clearly the two are both technology pieces, but they have no actual relation to each other. And then there's this other one where he is pointing the remote control at a swan on a lake. There's even less of a relationship there between the remote control and the swan. So maybe this idea of kind of feudally trying to control the movement of technology within the overall scope of the world of technology. There's no single person who is controlling technology as a cultural force. And then also kind of mankind's attempt to control nature with his technology or just force of will or whatever, and the fact that nature is kind of placidly looking back and being like, you cannot control me. And I think that that thought sort of connects into this interesting piece of styling that we have throughout the show, these headpieces that they're wearing, almost like these helmets almost, where they're different shapes and they're different colors, but they all seem to be at least visually demonstrating this idea that the helmets or the head caps are what's keeping their hair in place. That's probably not realistically what's actually happening. Their hair is styled and probably being held together with clips and bobby pins and stuff. They have this very futuristic feel to them, like it's some kind of technological thing of the future that we don't yet understand when we look at it. And one that's trying to control the very natural force of hair that wants to be unruly and needs to be a certain way. It's kind of our attempt to tame our manes. Okay, we're not using that. This, of course, plays into the central theme of the show of magnetism, where it's kind of being represented in a technological sort of twist. Like I said, we see the airplane dress used many different times and for many different purposes throughout Chalayan's career. Here, we kind of tie it into this show a little bit more by placing tulle underneath the technological part of the dress. And we will see pink tulle specifically being used in a beautiful way here in just a bit. And I know I've said it once already, but isn't it so great to hear people losing their shit at a fashion show? Like, there are so many fashion shows that are so austere and unapproachable and solemn that it's just kind of nice to hear like everybody freaking out like they're at like a sports game or at a concert or something. What's that? You said you liked the pink tulle and you want to see more pink tulle? I will give you more pink tulle. These two dresses are a beautiful demonstration of the theme of erosion in this show. And also they are entirely made of pink tulle. Again, from the notes that were provided at the exhibition, it says, Chalayan shaved a bale of shapeless pink tulle, giving it the contour of a dress. In the same way that formation of mountains occurs through natural erosion, Chalayan formed his own monuments through the gradual cutting of the fabric. So here closer to the end of the show, we're kind of getting a little bit more abstract and avant-garde, a little less wearable with the designs, but I mean, I think the concept is represented very beautifully, and I mean, it's obviously very cool to look at. In the penultimate section, we see two different kinds of dresses, basically. One could be a continuation on the idea of that oversized shrunken dress that we saw earlier. The other one is a little bit more interesting to me because it's a new concept. We're going to close the show out in the final section by looking exclusively at corsets. And so this is a little bit of a precursor to that, I think. These strange things that are strapped over their shoulders that they're holding with their hands. I believe this is meant to be kind of the opposite of a corset, in that a corset is meant to be something that is an unseen force, that one of its purposes is to help you stand up straighter and to kind of preserve sort of a youthful posture of the body. This is doing the exact opposite effect. It's something that is conformed to these young ladies' bodies in a way that looks pretty natural, and actually sort of in a weird way looks kind of comfortable to like have your like arms when they're dead stretched out, to have something to kind of lock into with your fists. But it is obviously having the opposite effect of a corset, in that it is encouraging your shoulders to bow forward, which is obviously not what you want your shoulders to do. So we sort of have anti-corsets here in this part of the show, sort of the polar opposite of the posturing purpose of what a corset is. In the final section, we have some beautiful pieces that are meant to be these avant-garde takes on the corset. The corsets themselves are an unseen force that shape the visual world around us because they are not meant to be seen. It is an undergarment that is actually shaping your body for a way that is supposedly a more desirable presentation for others. So basically, I think what we're seeing here is the normal panels that make up a corset. We're seeing a whole corset that is made up of the individual panels that are lined with boning that are generally shaped like this. Once the actual corset itself is built, those same panels are kind of being geometrically expounded upon to create different shapes. And there you have it, folks. Well, the runway video for this kind of fades to black after these 5 models come out. But in the Vogue review for the show, it says that the floor opened up and the models were swallowed into the stage, that like a trap door opened and they all fell down. That sounds so sick. I cannot imagine why that would not be included in the video, but apparently that happened also. So that's a pretty cool way to end this. I definitely wish I had video of it. Here's the most important thing that you need to understand about this runway show. You should subscribe to my OnlyFans, my Patreon. You need to follow me on Instagram. You need to follow me on Twitter. Help my media empire grow mightier and mightier. I love you more than words can say. I want to kiss you on the mouth. Goodbye.